यूपीएससी के अकॉर्डिंग इम्पॉर्टेंट कंटेंट पाने के लिए ईजी क्लासेस को ज़रूर सब्सक्राइब कर लें और बेल आइकन भी प्रेस कर दें जिससे कि नोटिफिकेशन मिलता रहे।
Good morning, everyone. Today we have been discussing our psychological basis of ethics, and now we are going to move to understand the moral concepts and as well as the moral judgments. Okay, let us begin with the moral concepts. So now just try to understand the moral concepts. What are the moral concepts? First and foremost, moral concepts are concepts. They are known as moral concepts because they examine your action. And the moral concept is known as your right and wrong. So just try to understand first the right and wrong. Right and wrong. Right. The first, what is right? Right is a term which is derived from the root word rectus. Rectus means what? Straight. It's a straight. It's a straight, you know. And when it's a straight means what? According to rule. In morality, in ethics, what is the meaning of this straight? According to rule. So this right is according to rule. So when any action conforms, you know, when action conforms with the moral law or moral principle or rule or moral rule. Later on we will be discussing what is moral rule, what is moral principle, what is moral law. Principles are derived from laws, rules are derived from principles. So right now we are discussing the rules. When any particular action conforms moral rule is known as the right action. Is known as right action. Why it is known as right action? Because always we examine a particular action. As you know, life comes in moments. Life comes in a particular action, and you always interact with a particular man. Okay, so this is according to the first thing, definition. Definition is according to right is straight, according to rule. And when action conforms, then what is wrong? What is wrong then? Wrong is it is derived from the root word verb, you know. Wrong is basically a verb. Verb means when it is any action, when the rule is twisted or when there is a twist of a rule. So when there is a twist of rule means when action is not according to rule, it's known as wrong, and wrong is just opposite to your right. So this is the definition of right and wrong. And interesting thing, we have to know that wrong is the fundamental notion, right is the fundamental notion of jural ethics. And later on So it's a fundamental notion of jural ethic. Kant is the man. Kant is a person who have accepted right is as the fundamental, the prime notion of his jural ethics. Later on with Kant, we will be discussing whether the right is the supreme notion or the good. We will be discussing, okay, so now this right is the prime notion of jural ethics, first thing. And now, second thing what we have to discuss is right and wrong, then right and good. Try to understand. The next is right and good. And what is good? Good is known as the consequence. Good is known as the end. Good is known as the ultimate end. So it's known as end or ultimate end. And right is known as the means. Right is known as the means. So right action produces good. So good is the end. That's the first thing. And in teleological ethics, now you can see in what is good itself. Just let me discuss. First thing, good is the end and it's a consequence, and right is defined as means. So this is subordinate to good. It's a subordinate. It's a subordinate to good, you know, and it's not only subordinate but it's also known as subservient. So it's a subservient. Subservient. No, so it is subservient to good. It serves the purpose of good. Okay, and what is good itself? Good itself is defined in two ways: intrinsic good and extrinsic good, absolute good and relative good. So what is good? First, you know, when we define good, it is defined in two ways. So now we are going, the first thing over here, this only thing we have to say that good is the end, and now we are going to define good. So good have two kinds: relative good and absolute good. Let me define in such a manner. What is good? As you know that it is classified in two ways. First, in intrinsic good. Intrinsic means what? Intrinsic means the good in itself. The good in itself. And what is good in itself? Good in itself are three, you know: truth, beauty, and good itself. And it is also presumed in ethics that good is the higher than them, but that's another thing. First thing we have to understand that truth is a concept of, because three aspects, human existence has three aspects. Human mind has always three cravings. Man wants to know the truth. What's the mystery of this world? What's the mystery of this life? Who am I? All these questions, you know. So man is concerned with the truth. The second, man is concerned with the beauty also, because it satisfies himself. And the good, and always he tries to perform the good. Why? Because good can be called as the ultimate end, because ultimately he wants good. So, but we are not going to compare all three. First thing we have to right now just we have to understand that truth, beauty and good. Truth, beauty and good are intrinsic values. Also they are known as the absolute good, highest good, and highest good is defined as the summum bonum. But first, this is intrinsic, and extrinsic are instrumental. Extrinsic are known as the instrumental. They are out from outside. They are also known as extrinsic are known as your instrumental. They are also known as instrumental. So intrinsic value is health, wealth, prosperity, these things. Wealth is there, you know, health is there, you know, and health, wealth, prosperity is there, and so etc. Health, wealth and prosperity, these things are, you know, prosperity of course gives you many things, many objects, and property and you know, personality and property go hand in hand, you know. The more you have personality, the more you have, you know, the property, the sound you have a personality, or you can say the more sound you have a personality. Personality means, if you take in a sense of, you know, the not only a personality as a physical personality but also as a mental personality, then you can attain, if you have very sharp mind, and then you can attain millions of money. So though both of them go, you know, hand in hand. So that's not our point right now. So this is intrinsic value and good, but these are known as the values right now. And good, in good, when we define good, it is known as highest good or absolute good. You will call it highest good, and it is also known as the relative good. Highest good is known as, in ethics, it is defined as the summum bonum. This is also known as the summum bonum. Summum bonum, bonum, summum and bonum. This is also known as summum bonum. And in ethics, it is defined as the self-realization. The highest end of the ethics is defined as the self-realization, but right now we are not going to discuss that. That's the subject matter of perfectionism. Okay, so this is highest good. And what is relative good then, or instrumental good? You know, relative, I'm sorry, relative good. When we talk about the relative good, just try to understand, there are many good, like your, you know, the bodily good. Health is a bodily good. A good health is a bodily good. You know, a wealth is your economic good. We call it economic good. All values, most of values are good, you know, economic good, and like this, social good. If you have, you know, the good social contacts, there is social value, social good. So one can attain a social good like this, you know. So this is known as a relative good. These are known as a relative good. And what is the highest good? They are means to the highest good. And as far as the highest good is concerned, this is defined in ethics, summum bonum. So that we will discuss later on. Now, so good and intrinsic good, and these are also known as values. You know, these are known as values. So they are the values as well as, you know, they are known as also values. Okay, let us move ahead. So we have discussed the good as well as the highest good. And now we have to discuss the right and duty. What's right and duty? Just try to understand right and duty. Right, we understand. Now it's a matter of duty. What's the duty? It is always taken together because to make it more clear. The duty, when you perform, you know, our right action habitually, or the first thing, what is duty? Duty, when any action you see it is good, then you feel kind of obligation. We should perform it. This is the element of duty. This obligation is a element, necessary element of duty. And a duty, you feel a kind of, you know, you feel a kind of obligation. If you don't perform it, feel remorse. And if you perform it, you feel a sense, sense of complacence. And what happens when you perform your duties regularly? And what is duty? The right action is defined as duty. Some right actions are, in short, you can say the right action. That's why it is written as right and duty. Right action is defined as a duty. So we should perform only right action. See just how the ethics is logical. Just try to understand. Ethics is very much logical. Okay, so right, duty is a right action. Right action becomes duty. Duty is the subset of right action. And once you decide the right action, that becomes a duty. And now, but when you perform this duty regularly, habitually, then you attain the virtue. So regular practice or the habitual practice of duty, habitual. When we perform habitually, you know, our duty. So when you perform regularly your duty, you attain virtue. So next thing comes virtue. Okay. And when you perform and when you commit wrong thing, so right is so important, right things. And when you perform the wrong action regularly, or when you commit wrong action, then you know that then we attain the vice. So vice and virtue are attained through your performing of regular performance of your action. So now we have to discuss the vice and virtue. Just try to understand. This is your. Now we can move to right and virtue, and over here you can understand habitual performance of right action. Habitual performance of right action is known as virtue, because he has a quality, he has a good quality to perform duty regularly. And as we know that duties are defined as the right action, so definitely he will achieve good results, and definitely right action have their the good consequences, because right itself has been defined as the means of good. Now you can see how it is it is logically consistent. Okay, so that's the thing, and I think you understand. And okay, I now move to your virtue. So virtue is right and virtue. Over here we have defined the habitual practice of right action is known as the virtue, and the commission of wrong action and the regular commission of wrong action is known as vice. And what is virtue again? Virtue is known as the excellence of character. It is known as excellence. Virtue is your excellence of character. It's the kind of excellence of character. And what is vice? It's it's virtue. And what is vice? Vice is known as the taint of character. It's a taint, stain, black spot. Taint, stain, a black spot, So this is known as your taint. And excellence and taint, both are attained, both are acquired. That's very interesting thing. Both are acquired. So now we are going to move. Now you can understand vice and virtue both. You understand what is virtue, what is vice. Later on we will be discussing virtue in detail. But right now just we are trying to understand the basic definitions of the moral concepts. Okay, and now let us move. So this is your virtue And after virtue, we have to discuss the desert. What is desert? Or you can say desert, because desert, when you say, it gives another meaning. But anyway, accent is not so important. You know, this desert. Desert is known as, what is desert? Merit and demerit. Merit and demerit. So, merit and demerit. Okay. So, what is merit now? Merit is, just try to understand. Merit is elevation of character. It's elevation. Elevation of character. You know, so elevation is elevation. Merit is elevation of character. Okay. And what is demerit then? Degradation. Of course, degradation. It's a degradation of I know, it's a degradation of character. So, merit and merit are applicable to character. Both terms are applicable to character. Both terms are applicable to character. On the other hand, you know, your right and wrong. Right and wrong are applicable to right. The notions of right and wrong. The notion of right and wrong is applicable to action. It is applicable to action. It's not applicable to your character. No. Merit. It's a meritorious character. You know, and sometimes we also call it meritorious action, but that's not correct. And one more thing is there, right and wrong. Actions are either right or wrong. It's a matter of quality. And merit and demerit are matter of quantity. Just try to understand. This merit and demerit are matter of quantity. Degrees. And your right and wrong are not the matter of quantity, it's a kind of quality. Either the action is good or bad. It can't be both. Either the action is right or wrong. Can't be both. That's it. So, right and wrong are concerned with the action, and they are the qualitative desert. And desert is, you know, the is a genus of merit and demerit. It's a generic term. You know, it's a generic. And merit and demerit are it's a specific. It's a specific, and it's nothing but your, you know, it's a genus. Your demerit is genus. Genus of what? Merit and demerit. But we never call it desert. We always call merit and demerit. They are always in use. So this is merit and demerit, and now so we have understood few basic concepts like right and wrong, the good and highest good, relative good, right and duty. And when we have been duty, just let me emphasize on duty. And as you know, what is duty? Duty is something, you know, conceded by society. It's a conceded, because society concedes some rights to individuals, some rights, and it concedes and also enforce, and of course the right and duties are reciprocal. and no one has a right to infringe the rights of others. So society gives, it's your society. Now you call it a state also, but society gives, some, in morality we call it, in ethics we call it society. So society concedes some rights to its member, to its individual members, and also gives, duties to perform, and both are reciprocal. The thing, the one thing which is right of one individual is the duty of another. Not might be duty of other, is the duty of other. The right of child is the duty of parent. So, okay, you understand, and that is also discussed in your GS. So right now, GS in other papers. So now we are discussing only the duties, and duties are conceded by, rights are conceded by the society, and duties are enforced by, duties you can say enforced by the society. So rights are conceded and duties are enforced by the society. So duties are enforced by the society. So yeah, this is the thing, and no one has right to infringe in the rights of others. So, and that is that this law, this is known as your law, social norms, social law, which cannot be violated, and violation, if there is violation of this principle, then society has right to punish them. So that's why violation. If there is a violation, then there is a concept of punishment, So no one has right to violate it, and in a case of violation, society punishes that particular individual. Okay, so this is our merit and demerit, deserts, and now we have to understand subjective rightness and objective rightness. Let's try to understand subjective rightness and objective rightness. When we say the subjective rightness, subjective rightness always depends on the person's conviction. So it depends on the personal conviction. Personal conviction. It depends on personal convictions. Why it depends on the personal convictions? Because one can understand the moral principle by one's own conscience, by one's own by one's own reason, and everyone decide according to his belief, according to his conviction, according to his knowledge, and according to his awareness, experience, and all that. So in short, in a brief, we can say one defines what is subjective rightness. Subjective rightness always depends on the personal conviction. But what's the but what is this objective rightness? Objective rightness depends on the actual consequences. It depends on actual consequences of action. And there is always conflict. So let me. So it depends on actual consequences. That's the objective rightness, and that is why we know there is always. That's why we know that there is objective validity of any action. Otherwise, we cannot determine the objective validity. Otherwise, everyone will say that I am right. Then everyone claims that, and it happens generally that everyone says that I am right. but and again we will be discussing this one, okay, and how we will be discussing this one again in next chapter, when we will discussing, when in next topic, when we will be discussing that how this objective, what is objectivity and what is subjectivity, and again we will be discussing how it can be determined, the objective validity, and then we will see that what's in fact the objective, the validity of any moral action. But right now we are trying to understand not the validity, subjective validity or objective validity. Right now we are trying to understand subjective rightness and objective rightness. So subjective rightness depends on personal conviction, everyone claims that he is right, and objective rightness depends on the actual consequences of action, and that's why it's always morally evaluated. That's why the action of an individual is morally evaluated. It's society, it's other people who evaluate the action of a particular individual. That's it. So, and now we can move to moral judgments. Now just try to understand moral concepts. We are going to discuss, the moral judgments. Now just try to understand moral judgments. And what are the moral judgments? Moral judgments means when you say something about any action. And yes, of course, we will discuss bit definition and everything. And before going to moral judgment, let's see what's moral consciousness. So first thing you have to discuss the moral consciousness. Moral consciousness. And what's a moral consciousness? Moral consciousness is a kind of, the awareness about the morality. It's a kind of awareness. It's a kind of awareness. How morally you are conscious, or it's a consciousness of morality. Again, we can say consciousness of morality. Consciousness of morality. So it's a consciousness of morality itself. That's why we call it moral consciousness. Understand? How morally we are aware. This is also very important. So that's the moral consciousness. And this moral consciousness has three aspects. What are these three aspects? It has all three aspects: cognitive, affective, and cognitive, as we know. So it has three aspects: cognitive, second aspect is affective, and third one is known as your cognitive. So first, cognitive. And as we know, the cognitive aspect of moral judgment is moral consciousness is the moral judgment itself. It's a moral judgment itself. So over here we have to discuss the moral judgment. It's a moral judgment itself. But before going to this moral judgment, let me discuss what is this cognitive aspect. It's intellectual aspect. Okay. So it's intellectual aspect, and it's a kind of the knowledge and awareness. It's a knowledge about the about the action and how we take the judgment about something, how we decide, how we how we pass a judgment, and what is this judgment. And first I will come on it, this moral judgment, but let me define this affective aspect. Affective aspect of moral consciousness. Affective aspect of moral consciousness, we'll come back on it. We'll come back on moral judgment. Right now we are discussing just three aspects. So the second aspect is known as affective aspect. It's a kind of feeling. The first one is intellectual aspect. This is intellectual aspect. This is a kind of knowing you can. And this is kind of feeling. And what this is a feeling, and what kind of feeling this one is affecting? There is a feeling of the reverence about the morality, and there is always a feeling of when we get the result will be there is a kind of satisfaction in anticipated foreseen end. And of course, when we perform it, then we feel kind of self-complacence. And when we don't perform it, we feel kind of remorse. So there is a feeling of complacence, self-complacence. Self-complacence. And there is also kind of, the remorse. There is also kind of remorse. When we perform something, when we, perform good action, moral action, we feel sense of complacence. And when we commit something wrong, so in a commission of wrong action, we have kind of remorse. There is remorse, kind of regret. So remorse, regret, these are the things, these are the things, the consequences of wrong action. And this kind of satisfaction, good feeling, complacence are the feelings. So this is emotive part. This is the emotive aspect or emotional aspect. Generally you call it emotional aspect, feeling or emotional, but we call it emotive. Emotive term is, seems better. This is emotive. First one is cognitive, and second is your emotive, affective or emotive, and the third is conative. And as far as this is conative is concerned, it's a volitional factor. It's a kind of willingness. First one is knowing, second is feeling, third is willing. It's a willing. What's willing then? Just try to understand. It is kind of volitional factor. It is also known as volitional factor. This is also a volitional factor. So volitional factor means willingness, the kind of willingness, and putting into action. So this is the putting into action. Conative, as you know, is nothing but the action. So moral consciousness have always three aspects. It's always three aspects. And now we'll have to come back on the moral judgment. So we'll have to come back on moral judgment. So this has to be discussed. Okay. So now we have to discuss the moral judgments, and let me see the time first. Yeah, it's enough for today, and tomorrow we'll be discussing this one. Thank you everyone.